Let's move on to the contact data page. And there we have a class-based component. So let's change that to a constant contact data, which holds our functional component that receives the props. And here we're managing state, and actually quite a big state object. But this is not really a problem. The only interesting thing here is that in this state object, we have one large piece of state that is related to our order form with the validity and so on. And then we have an additional field which simply contains the overall validity of the form. Now we could leave it all in this one super big state object, but with the use state hook, it is actually better, and you should import that, it is actually better to split this into two state objects or two state pieces. Now, why is that better? It simply can make it easier to manage your application if you split state into chunks. And obviously you could also split the overall order form here into chunks so that you have one state for the name control, one for the street control, one for the zip control. But to keep the logic we already wrote, where I do actually dynamically go through my state object and access different fields for different inputs that were used. To keep that, I will actually not break this large state object into smaller pieces. I'll just construct two different state pieces, one for the order form and one for the overall form validity, which is actually right now stored in here. So for that, let's use state here and pass in that large object with the name field, with the street field, and so on. So all the way down right before here, and close it before form is valid. And then let's also use state and pass in false, and then get rid of form is valid. You could, of course, also manage an object here that contains form is valid and then the value false or true. But since we just need that value, we can also just manage that value standalone in here. Here I will extract two fields. Form is valid and valid, and set form is valid. And for our large state up there, we also need to extract the state values. Here, the constants I'll extract, I'll name them order form and set order form. So now we have use state in place, managing our form state. Let's now go down to the order handler. And in the places where we access this state order form, in all these places, and I'm selecting all these places in this component right now, I want to use just order form. Now, the order handler here, by the way, should become a constant, so a function stored in a constant of this functional component. In all the places where we use this props, and I'm selecting all these places now, we should use just props. And the input changed handler here should also become a constant. Now, in there, I'm ultimately setting my state, and therefore now here, I will call set order form and pass in the updated order form, because that will replace the order form object as it should. And I'll call set form is valid and pass in form is valid, which is either true or false. And now we can get rid of set state down there. Now let's also remove the render method and remove one closing curly brace. And in here, you now want to make sure that in all the places where you use this order handler or this input changed handler, so for example, in these two function calls, you remove this. And when you access this form is valid, this should now just be form is valid, because if you scroll up here, I'm extracting form is valid from my use state call. And let's see where else we're using something like this. I think it looks good. Now at the very bottom, rename the component you're exporting to meet your constant name, in my case, contact data with a lowercase character. Now, I have an error somewhere. Yeah, here, right where I use or initialize my form is valid state, that curly brace here has to go. And now this looks good. Now let me quickly search if we have a this keyword in here, which we shouldn't. Looks good. Let's now save that And let's confirm that it works by building a burger, going to the checkout form, and clicking continue there. We can still see that form here, and validation also still seems to work. Yeah, this looks good. Let's enter an email address here and click order. And under orders, we can see that burger now. So that still works now. And with that, we converted the contact data component as well.